Episode 4 of The Amazing Digital Circus is now one of my favorite episodes of television ever, so let's talk about what it is about Gangle's journey that made it so amazing. My name is Deepcut, gamers call me Deep in the Box or Jackcut sometimes, and if you subscribe in the Digital Circus, do you subscribe in real life? Now, each episode of The Amazing Digital Circus is supposed to focus on a different character, with the previous episode being more about Zooble and Kane, and today's episode being more about Gangle. We all knew that things would get pretty dramatic for the character-centric episodes as we got more into the stories, and Gangle so far is the greatest example of that. With this being a prime example of something actually being a great episode, instead of just having a moment within it that makes the episode itself feel great. In this episode, Gangle manages to convince Kane to do an adventure where they just work a normal fast food job, something Gangle did in real life before ending up in the circus, and something that Gangle acts like she enjoys, but of course there's so much more going on here than what's on the surface. The episode opened with Gangle sad because her comedy mask had been broken, but thanks to Zooble with their many parts, Gangle is able to find a new comedy mask which seems to totally change her mood. As Gangle explains, it makes her feel normal, and normal becomes an important theme for the episode. For instance, when Gangle manages to convince Kane to let them work at a fake fast food joint, she also convinces him to make her the shift manager, just like she was at her job in real life. With her new comedy mask making her smile, Gangle is able to approach this job in a seemingly positive way, and it seems like simulating her real life is something that would be good for her. But as the episode goes on, she starts to crack and we get a look at her real issues. This starts with Jax refusing to work, and Zooble not wanting to either. So Gangle calls up Kane to make sure there is some sort of punishment for those who don't follow her orders. This is already very concerning on its own, but at first you want to just believe it's what Gangle has to do for her form of therapy. But as the episode goes on, we see it's a lot less about therapy and a lot more about this addictive feeling of control. When Pomni later takes the time to talk to Gummy Goo, for instance, Gangle has a little freak out and claims that Pomni thinks her authority isn't real just because the game itself isn't real. A lot of this seems to come from Gangle letting go of her childhood dreams, which we learn about in a training tape that Jax has to watch when he doesn't want to work. Here, Gangle mentions how working at Spudsy's also means letting go of your dreams, such as creating your own manga-styled webcomic. This is kind of the anime nerd equivalent to becoming something like a big actor or celebrity, and it's something that feels attainable to a lot of young people because all they have to do is work on one comic. But that can take a long time to become successful if it ever does, and in that time a lot of people are still expected to get a job in order to help make ends meet and support themselves. This in turn takes up too much time and energy for the person to actually pursue their dream, and what little time they do have they want to spend resting and having fun, so it ends up just crushing the dream entirely. It's kind of a devastating reveal to the audience for an indie animation cartoon character, where a lot of us watching the show have that very same dream of making Japanese-style webcomics or even our own animated series. The question becomes, why does Gangle crave working at a fast food restaurant for an adventure instead of just asking Kane for more time to work on her comics like we see at the end of the episode? Zooble acts like Gangle hadn't worked on her comics in a while there, indicating that the events at Spudsy's are what inspired her to return to it. But it does make sense to me that she'd need to work at a place like Spudsy's again before she can indulge that. As Gangle made clear with Jax and Pomni, what she really wants is control, and having control over others gives her a sense of security and safety. Working on webcomics is fun, but you have no control over the audience or your own success, and it can be really hard to keep putting yourself out there after years of trying and getting no real audience. What Gangle has in the Digital Circus is unlimited time to just make comics that virtually no one is going to read except for her closest friend Zooble. So despite how toxic Gangle acts, returning to Spudsy's is something of a comforting experience, one that returns the illusion of control by making her the boss of the others. Fast food jobs have a reputation for being very negative experiences, and it's pretty exhausting work no matter how good the pay is or how accommodating the management is, which is often just not the case. I don't want to speak about this subject acting like there aren't people who have very happy and healthy lives while working at these sort of places, both as entry-level workers and management, but I also just understand how any job can feel like a terrible job if all you are doing is exhausting yourself instead of doing what you dream about. To be the shift manager at a fast food location, you should be organized, good with people, and very observant more than anything else, I'd say, and the show isn't trying to paint all fast food jobs or managers as bad. But with Gangle, they are using this specific job as a sort of shell to explain the psychology of a specific type of person who can end up at this sort of position. As a manager, Gangle actually has to do very little except open and close, clothes, and even at the end of the shift, she's mostly just standing around alone. This means going through a checklist of very basic jobs to turn on machines and lights, but throughout the day, what gives Gangle real joy is telling other people what to do. As she says to Jax when he's tired and just trying to take a break, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean. And at this kind of job, a manager can be generally trying to make sure you are always working, instead of trying to maximize your work potential, and that is what Gangle is trying to do here. She's trying to always make sure someone else is working, so she can feel like she is bossing them around. Gangle is the type of person who had no control anywhere in her personal life, and the way she's talking to Jax in her training tape gives me the feeling that she was talked to this way by one of her parents, an authority figure in her life who wanted her to get something of a real job instead of pursuing a webcomic. The fact that Gangle takes so much pride in being a shift manager in particular seems to indicate that her parents saw this as a good thing as well. And even if it's not what we'd think of as a typically successful job, it was something that made her feel good because her parents finally accepted her when they wouldn't accept her as she was. However, this doesn't mean she was actually a better worker than anyone else in particular. And instead, I think this episode paints her as getting this shift management position because she just puts on this smiling face and acts like everything is great while working at the job. Most of the other employees at her real-life workplace were probably more like Pomni, Jax, and even Ragatha, who is acting severely not sober in order to make her feel like that one restaurant employee that we all know. Despite Spudsies being a dream killer, it would quickly make it the one place in real life where Gangle felt like she had control, with her being desperate to milk every shift for as much validation as she could as a leader, but where she is always wearing a very fake smile. Throughout the episode, characters point out that they like her more when she isn't smiling, not just the normally rude Jax, but even Ragatha and her altered state of mind. We do see that Gangle is able to change her expression both on her comedy and tragedy mask, so at the end of the day, that's all they really are, just a mask, just ornaments she puts on that allows her to visually express a tone, but tools which don't actually change how she feels inside, and that's a heavy thing for a character to carry. In the real world, Gangle was basically promoted because she had a very happy attitude. Having a happy attitude, even if fake, was what got her ahead of everyone else. Yet it also seems to make everyone else treat her like she isn't very serious, like she herself is just some sort of NPC. They may obey her as an authority at the workplace, but even Ragatha, who is usually very friendly to Zubul, is admitting to finding Gangle's forced positivity hard to deal with. I think it's very telling that Gangle's sadness gets noticeably deeper when Jax leaves the restaurant, with him saying that it wasn't fun as he exits. Gangle probably didn't expect him to say it was fun, but his quick dig just reminds her that she took a chance to get closer to others and instead squeezed them for her own addiction of validation. Not that Jax doesn't deserve it with the constant harassment he does to Gangle, but as we see at the end of the episode, she could have used it as a chance to grow closer to the others, like Zubul. Zubul is an important character this episode because we can see exactly the kind of friend that they try to be to others. While Zubul seems like they want to avoid everyone and everything, they really just want to avoid Jax, who again deserves that with his legitimate harassment of the others. And Zubul seems to want to support Gangle in particular, with this being emphasized thanks to Ragatha, interestingly. Ragatha is generally seen as the mom of the group or older sister, just the nurturing figure who tries to help everyone work on their needs and issues in an emotionally healthy way. With this attitude, however, Ragatha is essentially the shift manager of the digital circus lobby. Like Gangle at Spudsies, Ragatha puts on a mask to seem positive to everyone, but that doesn't mean she actually likes you. Ragatha instead is shown to be more motivated against Jax even when she seems to be helping others, and after Jax hurts Gangle, Ragatha's first instinct is to begin arguing with Jax again. While at Spudsies, Ragatha's non-sober state allows her to say what is really on her mind, revealing that she has some pretty crude thoughts that she doesn't normally let out in her sober state. While she is normally so nice to Gangle and hating Jax, we see that without her sobriety or her ability to put on a mask really, Ragatha is literally no different from Jax. Don't get me wrong, it'd be funny if every character, even Pomni, said that Gangle wasn't as fun with the comedy mask on. But by making it just Jax and just Ragatha, it shows how Ragatha is just putting on an act when she's trying to be nice. In the same way, Gangle is no different from the other employees, both in the circus and who she worked with in real life. She's just putting on a mask to seem helpful and friendly, allowing her to be successful instead of actually happy. This is why Gangle tells Pomni that she can't talk to Ragatha about her feelings, as she doesn't know if anything Ragatha says is even genuine. Zubul notices this when they see Gangle walking out of the room after Ragatha's mean comment, and because of that, they make an effort to be there for Gangle when the work is over. Even with the way Gangle acted overall, Zubul showed they really do care about Gangle in what was a heartwarming end to an already amazing episode, with Zubul wanting to see the comics that Gangle had been drawing. The episode is amazing commentary, with the premise of the characters being trapped in a 3D video game, emphasizing how it feels to put on these masks of emotion. To have all of these feelings inside of us that don't match what is supposed to be a joyful exterior that you are legally mandated to wear for work. For Gangle in particular, if there's no one around to present herself to, she begins to just disassociate. She doesn't just double down on her sadness, but we can clearly see she also begins to just disconnect from everything around her, going into a blurry haze before being pulled out of it by Pomni. Pomni offered quite the kindness when she decided to stay late so that Gangle could go home early, despite the conflicts that they had had earlier. Pomni could have used the letter of the law against Gangle to make her stay alone after she let Gummigoo get away, but at the end of the day, she knew Gangle was going through her own issues. What Gangle wanted was her dream day at work, one where she was a good boss and everyone else smiled like good employees, and then everyone went home happy, feeling like they did a good day's work and made some money. Pomni didn't jump on this idea right away, but when she realized this, she knew it would make Gangle a lot happier to be able to leave early instead of dealing with the worst part of the game alone. This partly inspires Gangle to have an amazing moment with an authentic smile, one where she isn't wearing a comedy mask, and probably the only real smile we've seen of hers until the end of the episode, where she smiles again, saying that she doesn't deserve a friend like Zubul. It's so interesting how this is what it took for Gangle to be happy, as we like to imagine us being happier just working on our comics full time and not having to worry about a job or income. But there's just something so freeing about getting out after a hard day's work that you can't just help but look back fondly on. Like controlling the others by being the shift manager, you could say that there is something of a rush or high that Gangle gets, but there's also something very spiritual about the scene where Gangle finally does smile. Something that goes beyond that high or Pomni's little kindness and emphasizes something deep about Gangle's own nature. At the end of the day, working at a fast food place with Gangle's mindset is a series of highs and lows, and getting out of work was perhaps the greatest high she knew. Finally getting to take off the mask after she had burnt herself out on the validation and emotional breakdowns. But as you saw, this led unfortunately to Gangle being hit by a car. Of course, this is a game, so Gangle is fine, but with Kane saying that this would be like a real-life job, and this being modeled off of Gangle's experiences in particular, it hints at Gangle actually having been hit by a car after work one day. It could explain why someone would try and put her in the digital circus, because if she had become paralyzed from an accident like this sort of video game could have been the only way to try and experience something like life again. To not feel trapped in your body in a hospital room all day, even if you're just trapped in an avatar. It's definitely something I want to talk about more in a video soon, as the implications of this for the greater story are massive. But let me know in the comments down below what other topics I should tackle for Digital Circus Madness this week. Thanks for those who made it this far. If you really love the amazing Digital Circus, consider joining our early access membership club, where you get access to cool emojis of your favorite cartoon characters to use right here in the comment section, including our recently added Jax and Pomni emojis. You also get early access to some of our pet projects, where we're working on a big video explaining the secret story of Lucifer hidden in the Bible, and where we recently had our big video explaining the real-life history behind the Atlantis myth and the Disney movie it inspired. If you haven't seen it, go check that out, as even if you don't like or haven't seen the movie, it's got a lot of cool material that you might like. See you guys next time. Man, I do love running, especially when it's away from women who are madly in love with me. But one thing I never run from is another man. Well, 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 if it isn't my arch rival, Racer Rabbit. Shady the Bat, you're here for the magic crystal as well?